A very good morning to all of you once again, and as always, really hoping that you are well. We're going to go to Daniel chapter 7 again, Daniel 7, and this time from verse 15 onwards. And we're doing so because we're trying to make sense of what the scriptures reveal about the truly confusing days in which we live, as opposed to the myriad and misleading prophecies and prophetic interpretations we are being bombarded with from men. So we turned to Daniel 7 because it is both the core of the book of Daniel itself and also a key, if not the key, to understanding New Testament prophecy and particularly the mysterious book of Revelation. We saw last week that Daniel had a terrifying dream or vision of four great and monstrous beasts that emerged from the sea of mankind. They, as we saw, represent four world empires, each more brutal and antichrist than the previous one, which God himself would raise up as history progressed and reached its God-ordained endpoint. The heart of the message of this prophetic proclamation is that men rule for a time, the Son of Man reigns forever. Men rule for a time, but the Son of Man reigns forever. And this news is meant to encourage us, his children, and give us an ever-increasing yearning that day, the day of the Lord, would dawn for us. Turn now to the balance of the chapter, where the first matter concerns the perplexity experienced by the prophet. The perplexity experienced by the prophet. Having seen this awful vision with its strange and terrifying beasts, having seen a vision of the Ancient of Days, God himself, ruling over the heavenly court and judging evil, having seen one like a Son of Man, Jesus himself, given authority, glory, and sovereign power over all peoples, nations, and men of every language who would worship him, and the fact that his dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. Having seen all these things, Daniel is quite literally shaken to the core. Verse 15 tells us that I, Daniel, was troubled in spirit, and the visions that passed through my mind disturbed me. He was both troubled in spirit and his mind was disturbed. He had seen, after all, the heart of evil which exists at the core of every world empire. All the cruelty, the savagery, the brutality, the wanton power, the excess, the threat, the menace, the filth. And then he had seen the one who can't be seen because of his blinding holiness, and the one, like the Son of Man, who is given all authority and dominion to rule over an everlasting kingdom of peace. So the sight in the form of this vision of the Ancient of Days and the glory of the ruling, reigning Son of Man always throws saved human beings into total turmoil. They become incapable of controlling their fearful emotions and their alarmed thoughts. Such is the nature of God's holiness. Consider Jacob, for example, in Genesis 28:16, following his vision of God, how he was afraid, and he said, "How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven." Or John in Revelation 1:17, seeing the same Son of Man fell at his feet as though dead. Then he placed his right hand on me and said, "Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am the living one, and I hold the keys of death and hell." Or how about Ezekiel 3:23, where he records, "There I saw the glory of the Lord, and I fell face down in the dust." Daniel's experience was all the more terrifying because he witnessed God judging the powerful individual who kept speaking boastful words. He says in verse 11, "I kept looking until the beast was slain and its body destroyed and thrown into the blazing fire." Now, to have a vision of the Ancient of Days and his glorious and reigning Son Jesus must render us virtually incapacitated, even as his forgiven children. But how much more terrifying to witness, as Daniel did, the holiness of God destroying and consuming his enemies. Jeremiah witnessed that when God showed him that Jerusalem was awash with evil and that he, God, was going to judge that evil. Jeremiah records in chapter 4 and verse 19 how he said, "Oh, my anguish, I writhe in pain. Oh, the agony of my heart. My heart pounds within me. I cannot keep it silent." So how is this meant to encourage us as true believers in Jesus? Well, it points to the fact that we will never, ever have to suffer that eternal punishment from the Holy One, as the evil will have to, even as we may have to go through times of trial and tribulation while living in this dispensation of evil. We can rather embrace Jesus' words to John, "Do not be afraid. I am the living one. I was dead, and behold, I am alive forever and ever, and I hold the keys of death and hell." And then we could add, "And they will never," that is, death and hell, "will never be opened for you, because you are my beloved child." Following Daniel's perplexity, the second topic in this passage involves the power exercised by this kingdom. The power exercised by this kingdom. Now, just before we look at that, we need to read about what Daniel did following his vision. And that's told us in verse 16. He records that I approached one of those standing there and asked him the true meaning of all of this. And so he told me and gave me the interpretation of these things. The four great beasts are four kingdoms that will rise from the earth, but the saints of the Most High will receive the kingdom and will possess it forever. Yes, forever and forever. The four beasts are four evil world empires that God will allow to emerge on earth. But in spite of their power and evil, the saints of the Most High will receive and possess God's eternal kingdom for eternity. Again, such reassurance for Christians. Irrespective of the influence of these world empires on the lives of Christians, Jesus says in John chapter 10 and verse 27, "My sheep listen to my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can pluck them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, No one can snatch them out of my Father's hand. I and the Father are one. We need to hold on to that ultimate truth, even as we learn about what unfolds. And so from verse 19 we read what does unfold. Then I wanted to know the true meaning of the fourth beast, which was different from all the others and most terrifying, with its iron teeth and bronze claws, the beast that crushed and devoured its victims and trampled underfoot whatever was left. I also wanted to know about the 10 horns on its head, and about the other horn that came up, before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had looked more imposing than the others, and that had eyes and a mouth that spoke boastfully. As I watched, this horn was waging war against the saints and defeating them, until the Ancient of Days came and pronounced judgment in favor of the saints of the Most High, and the time came when they possessed the kingdom. Daniel is not interested here in the first 3 empires or kingdoms. It's the fourth one which intrigues him. And concerning that empire, the angel provides Daniel with 2 crucial pieces of information. Firstly, the angel speaks of its unprecedented power. Its unprecedented power. Verse 23 reads, "He gave me this explanation. The fourth beast is a fourth kingdom that will appear on earth. It will be different from all the other kingdoms and will devour the whole earth, trampling it down and crushing it." This fourth empire, as we saw last week, is even more powerful than the preceding 3 empires. It will have power to conquer every nation on earth. This speaks of unprecedented and extensive power. Secondly, the angel speaks of personal power. Personal power. Verse 24 says, "The 10 horns are 10 kings who will come from this kingdom. After them another king will arise, different from the earlier ones. He will subdue 3 kings. He will speak against the Most High and oppress his saints and try to change the set times and the laws. The saints will be handed over to him for a time, times, and half a time." In understanding this, we need to know that in the ancient world, unlike in much of today's world, it made no sense to talk of an empire or a kingdom without talking about an emperor or a king. At that time, empires were empires under an emperor. Kingdoms were such only under kings. The ruler made the kingdom. And that's why Israel in 1 Samuel 8:5 asked for a king other than God. They said to Samuel, "You are old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint a king to lead us, such as all the other nations have." God said to Samuel, "It is not you they have rejected, but they have rejected me as their king." This fourth kingdom has 10 horns, 10 kings. All the commentators that I have read are agreed that the 10 kings rule the empire simultaneously. This appears to be a coalition of nations, an umbrella organization with 10 sovereigns in partnership. Now this, and crucially, appears to be the precursor to what we read in Revelation 13:1, where John saw a beast coming out of the sea. He had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on his horns, and on each head a blasphemous name. The dragon, Satan, gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority.